Yes, is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction. So I shall be speaking on molecular testing in chronic myeloid leukemia for next 30 to 40 minutes. So chronic myeloid leukemia is a myeloproliferative neoplasm that originates in an abnormal pluripotent bone marrow stem cell and is consistently associated with the BCR-ABL1 fusion gene located in the Philadelphia chromosome. As you all know, there are three phases of CML. It can be a chronic phase, it can be an accelerated phase, or it can be a blast crisis. So recently in 2017, WHO has updated three additional criteria. They are provisional for accelerated phase. They include hematologic resistance to first TKI, any hematological, cytogenetic, or molecular resistance to two sequential TKIs, or occurrence of two or more mutations in BCR-ABL1 during TKI therapy. So CML has a molecular definition. It requires the demonstration of translocation 922 or its product BCR-ABL1 transcript. And it is this protein which is integral to CML leukemogenesis. So this is important to highlight that any leukocytosis is not CML. It has to be proved by cytogenetics or by molecular technique. So let us see the genetic basis of it. So this is the normal 9th chromosome and this is the normal 22nd chromosome. So whenever there is a reciprocal translocation, this part comes here and this part goes there. So BCR gene is located on chromosome 22 and ABL gene is located on chromosome 9. And this is how Philadelphia chromosome or BCR-ABL1 fusion is formed. And depending upon where the breakpoint occurs in BCR gene, there is formation of different type of transcripts depending upon the breakpoint. So this is a major breakpoint cluster region. So if there is a break here in BCR gene, then the result is P210 type of major transcripts. They can be E13A2 or it can be E14A2. If there is a break in minor region, then there will be formation of P210 type of transcript or E1A2. And it is this ABL1 region where majority of the kinase domain mutations happen, which may lead to resistance to one or more of the tyrosine kinase inhibitors like imatinib. So in about 95% of cases, CML is detectable by karyotype. However, in 5% of cases, it is cryptic. So it is detectable only by FISH or by RT-PCR. And it is important to note that majority of the transcripts in chronic myeloid leukemia are major transcripts. That is, they are E13A2 or E14A2. While in minority of cases, like about 1% of cases, they are minor transcripts, that is E1A2, or rarely in 2% of cases, we can see rare transcripts like E6A2, E8A2, E19A2, etc. So going back, Nowell and Hungerford first discovered Philadelphia chromosome and it was named after the city in which it was discovered. As you all know, I just explained about karyotyping. Then there is a reciprocal translocation between 9th and 22nd chromosome. So we can detect this by karyotyping. Or we can also do fluorescence in situ hybridization. So what you can see is a technique which is using dual color dual fusion probes. So red signal is for 9th chromosome and green signal is for 22nd chromosome. So in normal cells, we see two red and two green signals. But in CML, you see fusions. So two yellow signals, one red and one green. Now the advantages of detecting CML by molecular techniques are its cost, that is cheaper, its high sensitivity as compared to FISH, and its ability to detect low copy numbers of BCR-ABL1. However, it also has disadvantages, that is an RNA-based test, so it is susceptible to degradation by the cell. by RNases, and separate PCRs are required to detect separate transcripts. But molecular monitoring of CML copy numbers after imatinib is its main use. So if we look back around 30 years back, there are reports of RT-PCR, and it was usually utilized for knowing early relapse in cases of post-DBMT patients. But this was qualitative, that is, it was used to detect whether the transcripts were present or absent. Then to early 90s, interface FISH was introduced and competitive RT-PCR was introduced, but these were labor intensive. And in late 1990s, quantitative approaches for assessment of MRD, they were starting to be adopted widely. So it was during this time, about 2001, that this wonder drug turned tables. So imatinib binds to the ATP binding site on the BCR-ABL1 kinase, and it inhibits the proliferation of cancer cells. So these are the various milestones in standardization, the recent one being 2013 recommendation. And then there is the latest 2020 recommendation of ELN, which is quite similar to 2013 recommendation. So coming to those recommendations in a nutshell, they have described specific time points during which specific responses should be seen, failing which we call them as warning or failure depending upon the level. Like for example, at 12 months, we are expecting that BCR-ABL1 level would be less than 0.1%. That is major molecular response, failing which we will call warning if it is 0.1 to 1%, or failure even if it is more than that. And depending upon the response, appropriate tyrosine kinase inhibitor can be administered. So if there is T315I mutation, we will go for ponatinib or transplant. This is how we interpret this table. Coming to ELN 2020 recommendations, they are quite similar to 2013 ones, like I said, but they have given less importance to FISH. So majority of them are defined by real-time quantitative PCRs. So at 3 months, what we need to see is BCR-ABL1 level less than 10%, at 6 months less than 1%, and at 12 months and thereafter less than 0.1%. So this scale gives an idea of disease burden and thereby shows the response to the treatment delivered. So initially at the time of diagnosis, there are approximately 10 to the power 12 leukemic cells in the body of the patient. And when we give treatment, when we administer tyrosine kinase inhibitors, this level starts to come down. So FISH can detect at this level, meaning thereby that when there is complete cytogenetic response, there are at least minimum 10 to the power 7 to 10 to the power 8 cells still in the body which are not detected. So for detection of these, we need more sensitive technologies like real-time quantitative PCRs, which can detect major molecular response, which is at 0.1% level, as well as deep molecular responses, which can be at MR4, 4.5, or 5. So now this is an era of treatment-free remission. So we need to detect these levels of MR4 and MR5, which are their requirements. So ELN 2020 guides us to which tests we should order at diagnosis. So we need to do a bone marrow aspirate and biopsy just to see at morphology, proportion of blast cells, basophils, degree of fibrosis, and to identify whether there are any nests of blasts or not. We need to do karyotyping for confirmation, as well as to know additional clonal chromosomal abnormalities if present. And we must do a qualitative reverse transcriptase PCR for confirmation, as well as to detect the type of transcript which we can later on monitor. So these are NCCN guidances on which type of test to be done when. So karyotyping should be done at diagnosis, when there is failure to reach response milestones, when there is any sign of loss of response. A quantitative PCR must be done at diagnosis, then at every 3 months after starting treatment, and then after BCR-ABL1 level reaches 1%, it has to be done every 3 months for 2 years and every 3 to 6 months thereafter. And then kinase domain mutation analysis should be done in chronic phase when there is failure to reach milestones, any sign of loss of relapse, or disease progression into accelerator phase or blast phase. And these are very important definitions. of complete hematological response we call when there is complete normalization of peripheral blood counts with WBCs less than 10,000, platelets less than 4.5 lakhs, no immature cells such as myelocytes, promyelocytes, or blasts in peripheral blood, and no other signs and symptoms. Cytogenetic response we call complete when there are no pH positive metaphases detectable. Molecular response, most important milestone is major molecular response. So there is BCR-ABL1 level less than or equal to 0.1% on an international scale. And deep molecular response is defined as MR4 when it is at less than 0.01% and MR4.5 when it is less than or equal to 0.0032%. So let us understand everything on a case-based discussion. So this was a case which came to our referral lab with leukocytosis and absolute eosinophilia. There was hepatosplenomegaly, but no lymphadenopathy. There was no history of fever, night sweats, or any significant weight loss. Peripheral blood samples sent outside for molecular studies showed negative BCR-ABL1 by real-time PCR, JAK2 V617F exons 12, and MPL and CALR mutations were negative, and bone marrow showed kind of a reactive eosinophilia over a myeloproliferative neoplasm. FISH panel was also done, included PDGFR-A, PDGFR-B, and FGFR1 rearrangements. They were negative. And then it was referred to them for CBC review in view of physician suspicion of MPN based on clinical features. So this was the history. An expert hematopathologist reviewed the case and overall features were definitely consistent with a myeloproliferative neoplasm, but BCR-ABL1 was negative. Also, conventional karyotyping was not done initially and patient was not willing for a repeat marrow. So he gave me a call and NGS was ordered. So we did an NGS and it came positive for BCR-ABL1. So this was a rare E14A3 type of transcript. But I told that BCR-ABL1 was negative. So let us understand why this happened. So for that, we need to know what does real time or reverse transcriptase PCR mean. So what is RT-PCR? So RT-PCR is not real-time PCR. RT-PCR is reverse transcription PCR. Real-time PCR is called as RQ-PCR, that is real-time quantitative PCR. So in molecular diagnosis of CML, there are two basic tests. One is qualitative detection and one is quantitative detection. So for qualitative, we do RT-PCR, and for quantitative, we do real-time quantitative or RQ-PCR. So RT-PCR must be done at diagnosis. Like I told you before, qualitative detection of type of transcript is very important at diagnosis. Then only we can monitor that transcript. If quantitative is done and we don't know what is the initial transcript type, then we need to add a comment saying that because the fusion transcript prior to treatment is not known, false negative results cannot be excluded. So here we did a single strand RNA extraction and then convert into double stranded complementary DNA. And then we perform multiplex PCR for BCR-ABL1. So this is one type of design. You can have your own design. So this is BCR gene, this is ABL gene, and these are different type of transcripts that we see in CML. We use here two sets of primers, two forward and two reverse. So one primer is designed on BCR gene 5' to exon 1, one is 5' to exon 13, and other two primers, one is on BCR gene that is 3' to exon 21, and one is 3' to exon 3 on ABL gene. So whenever there is BCR-ABL1 fusion, for example, if we see for E13A2 type of transcript, then we will see two type of products. One is control product that we will see in all individuals because BCR gene will be present in all, and another specific product for E13A2 that is formed by these two primers. Suppose it is E14A2 type of transcript, then we will see again two products. One is control product and one is E14A2 specific product. So by knowing the length or size of the product, we can know which type of transcript is present in the patient. So let us see how polymerase chain reaction happens. So suppose this is the target region of DNA that we want to amplify. So we heat everything at 95 degrees centigrade. So by a process called as denaturation, both the strands separate. Now the constituents that we add include heat denaturation enzyme DNA polymerase, primers both forward and reverse, and free nucleotides, that is A, T, G, and C. Now we cool down everything to 55 degrees centigrade so the primers bind or anneal to the target sequence, and then raising the temperature to 72 degrees centigrade, the reverse transcriptase enzymes, they synthesize, or the DNA polymerase enzyme, they will synthesize a new strand of DNA using the free DNA bases. Now at the end of cycle 1, 2 will be formed of 1. So in cycle 2, again during the process of denaturation, the strands will separate, the primers will bind during annealing, and at the time of extension, the DNA polymerase enzyme will form or synthesize new strand of DNA with the help of free DNA bases. Again, in the third cycle, there will be denaturation, so the strands will separate. There will be annealing, so the primers will bind, and there will be extension, so the DNA polymerase enzyme will synthesize new strands of DNA. So important thing to note here is at the end of 3 cycles, we get 2 copies of target DNA. Now with each cycle, the copies of target DNA will start doubling. So 2 will become 4, 4 will become 8, 8 will become 16, 32, and so on. So from one single DNA molecule at the end of 4 hours, we get so many copies of target DNA. So how we will detect these? So at the end of PCR cycle, we will have products which we load on a gel and perform electrophoresis. And we add something called as a ladder, which will have known size fragments. So comparing the size of these fragments with the ones that we get into patients, we can know the approximate size of fragments and know which transcripts are present. To know whether our reaction or the PCR has worked properly, we use different type of controls. So minimum 3 controls need to be used. One is NTC, that we call as no template control, in which we do not add anything. So we ideally should see nothing here. If there is a band, there is a contamination, and the whole process needs to be repeated. This is the negative control, where we see only control band and no positive products. And then there is positive control. Depending upon which control we use, we see 2 bands. One is of control band and one is size specific product. So in this patient, we found 2 bands. One is a very faint control band and one is a positive band product, which we found at around 211 base pairs. And this was E14A2, A3 type of transcript. So this is a rare transcript. So how this was missed is because RT-PCR was ordered and real-time PCR was done in confusion, and that's why this patient got false negative outside. So BCR-ABL1 fusion got detected where exon 14 was fused to exon 3 of ABL1 gene, and routinely available RQ-PCRs for P210 transcripts will fail to detect the E14A3 type of transcripts, leading to false negative results. FISH was also done, which was positive, and the patient was started on imatinib and CBC got normalized. This is the second case of BLL which we came across last week only. So in this, we got 2 transcripts. So there was one which was major transcript, that is E13A2 type of transcript, and one is a very rare E1A3 type of transcript. So it is not uncommon in CML to get 2 different type of transcripts. So suppose this was a case of CML and a real-time PCR would have been ordered, you would still get a positive result, but only because of this. So you would miss this rare transcript, which would have required monitoring later on. So FISH in this case again came positive. So this is another case. So this was suspected case of a myeloproliferative neoplasm and on peripheral blood reported elsewhere as CML, that is chronic myeloid leukemia. But BCR-ABL1 was negative. So it was sent to us for NGS and we could detect this rare ETV6-ABL1 transcript. So this was possible only because we did next generation sequencing. So this is the next generation sequencing panel or OncoHeme panel that we are doing here. So it is a one-step test for all
Dr. Mehta?
He's joining the, he lost the connection.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, he just joined.
Yes, so can you hear me?
Sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. So sorry for the technical glitch. So this is the myeloid panel that we are doing. I was saying, so this is a one-stop test for all myeloid malignancies. So be it acute myeloid leukemia or myeloproliferative neoplasm or myelodysplastic syndrome or MDS-MPN or other cases, we need to do this panel just to detect anything and everything. So this panel is divided into DNA based analysis and RNA based analysis. So either you can ask for both or individually. So when we are thinking of a myeloproliferative neoplasm, we are expecting that we need to find JAK2, MPL and KLR. So they are covered in DNA panel. And for RNA, BCR-ABL1 will be covered here. So these are all the fusions that are detectable by this panel. So this was a rare case of chronic eosinophilic leukemia in which we could find ETV6-ABL1 fusion. These are the disorder-wise DNA-based analysis. So suppose if you are suspecting essential thrombocythemia, this is a rough guide to just to tell you that JAK2, KLR and MPL are covered in the panel. So this is how we approach myeloproliferative neoplasms here. So we do a bone marrow examination and karyotyping analysis. Along with that, we do BCR-ABL1 FISH or RT-PCR for detection. If it is negative, then for Philadelphia negative myeloproliferative neoplasm as well as other rare MPNs, we do an OncoHeme panel. So ideally, we need to do the whole panel. If there is cost constraint in the patient, then we need to do only OncoHeme DNA, but then we might lose on rare transcripts which are detectable by RNA based analysis like ETV6-ABL1 fusions. So coming back to different type of transcripts in CML. So suppose we detect, usually in all cases, 97% of cases, we will find major transcripts. So for molecular monitoring of these diagnosed patients, we will have to perform real-time quantitative PCRs. So what is real-time PCR? So just like any other PCR, it will have templates and a pair of primers. But what is different is there is sequence specific oligo called a probe. So it is different than primers in two different ways. So it lacks the 3' hydroxyl group, so the enzyme cannot extend it further. And another difference is that it is fluorescently tagged on both sides at 5' and 3' end by two fluorescent molecules. One is the reporter dye. It is so called because it reports the signal or reports the fluorescence to us during the RQPCR. And one is quencher dye. It is so called because it quenches the signals produced by the reporter dye. So whenever light is incident, the reporter fluoresces, but this fluorescence as expected is not detectable by us because there is something called as fluorescence resonance energy transfer. By this process, this signal is quenched by the quencher. So in normal quiescent stage, this signal is not detectable. Now let us see what happens when there is real-time PCR. It extends and reaches the reporter dye and then it cleaves it. So now reporter dye and quencher dye are far separated from each other. And then when light is incident, this fluorescence will be detectable by us. So depending upon the amount of fluorescence produced, we can know how many transcripts or the DNA or RNA based things are there in question. So this is sample amplification plot in real-time PCR. So on x-axis, we can see number of PCR cycles, and on y-axis, we can see the fluorescence. Now, there are two phases. One is exponential phase and one is non-exponential phase. So in initial parts of cycles, the copies start doubling, but they are not detectable because they are very less. And this is an exponential scale. So at some point of time, eventually these products starts accumulating and they reach a detectable fluorescence line, that is a threshold line. And the cycle at which this crosses the threshold line is called the cycle threshold value or the CT value. And this exponentially starts increasing. And at one stage, one of the components of the PCR becomes rate limiting and then it reaches a plateau phase. So we had plasmids in various dilutions which contain known copies. And then we compare the CT value of test sample with CT value of standard. So in short, from the blood or bone marrow sample, we'll extract the DNA and then reverse transcribe into cDNA, and then we perform quantitative PCRs both for BCR-ABL1 and ABL1. Here ABL1 acts as a control gene or housekeeping gene. A control gene here provides a normalized copy number and it also accounts for degradation of RNA. So this is a usual plate setup we can do in duplicates or in triplicates as recommended. So these are various plasmid dilutions which are used. These are various controls which are present and these are patient samples. So I'm not going into details of it, but there are lab recommendations which are put forward in 2015 for analyzing and reporting the results of real-time PCR for chronic myeloid leukemia PCR-ABL1 positive. These are other guidelines which act as complementary to those 2015 guidelines. These were put forward in 2011. These are BJH recommendations. So according to guidelines, there needs to be minimum numbers or minimum copies of reference gene transcripts, that is the housekeeping genes or control genes, to be obtained in the patient to say that this much response has been reached. So suppose we want to call it as an MR4 when there are undetectable BCR-ABL1 levels, then we need to get at least 10,000 ABL1 copies. If we need to say that it is MR4.5, then we need to document minimum 32,000 ABL1 copies. Likewise, 1 lakh for MR5. And ABL1 should minimum show 10,000 copies per sample to say that this is a good test done. So if ABL1 copies is less than 10,000, then ABL1 amplification is considered to be suboptimal and undetectable BCR-ABL1 levels should not be given. If ABL1 levels are less than 5,000, only positive results should be issued with a comment saying that MRD quantification is not reliable and must be repeated or interpreted with caution. A repeat sample is strongly recommended in this case. And if at all, ABL1 copies very rarely can come less than 1,000. If it is a very stored sample or a traveled sample, then sample is considered as failed and repeat sample should be requested, and it is unlikely that even positive test can be considered reliable. So this is just to show how much variation one sample can have. So this is the graph showing RQ-PCR done on 2 samples over a period of several months, 96 times. So this, you can see that this original value is 11% and the results have ranged from 5% to 16%. Likewise, for a level of 0.11% true value, it has ranged from 0.03 to 0.20%. So as you go down, the CV will start increasing. So this is how we calculate. We take sum of BCR-ABL1 and divide by sum of ABL1, and then we multiply it by 100 and then by conversion factor. So here conversion factor is obtained by comparing our plasmid dilutions to international standards. Let us see with our example. So suppose lab's conversion factor is 0.8 and we get 2 replicates of BCR-ABL1 as 7 copies and 3 copies, and ABL1 as 24,000 and 28,000 copies. So this is how we will calculate. So we'll take sum of BCR-ABL1, that is 10, and ABL1, that is 52,000, and then we multiply with conversion factor 100 to get a value of 0.015%. So this case has reached MMR, that is, it is less than 0.1%, but has not reached 0.01%. So it is not MR4. It is somewhere between MMR and MR4. Now let us see another case. So this is a known patient of CML on imatinib on regular follow-up and now has increasing copy numbers of BCR-ABL1. So as you can see, there is an upward trend. So what you will do? So it is known that imatinib resistance can occur due to lot of different factors. It can be because of lack of compliance. It can be because of an absorption issue. It can be because of interaction with other medications, because of plasma protein binding, or lack of intracellular availability of imatinib. But most common reason is found to be the kinase domain mutations. So it is found that among patients with chronic phase CML who develop resistance to imatinib, about 1/3 to 1/2 of them will have one or more BCR-ABL1 kinase domain mutations, which are detectable by direct DNA sequencing. So these are the indications for performing imatinib resistance or kinase domain mutation analysis. So it needs to be done at diagnosis if it is an accelerated phase or blast phase, during first line imatinib therapy in case of failure, or in case of increase in BCR-ABL1 transcript levels leading to MMR loss, or in any other case of suboptimal response. It can also be done during second line dasatinib or imatinib therapy or nilotinib therapy in case of hematologic or cytogenetic failure. Now, depending upon the type of mutation, appropriate tyrosine kinase inhibitor to which the patient is sensitive can be administered. So this table gives us a nice reference guide. So suppose the patient has F317L mutation. It is resistant to imatinib, as you can see here, and it is also resistant to dasatinib. So nilotinib would be a nice drug to administer to this patient. So let us understand this with something called as a switch clamp latch mechanism. So in ABL protein, what we find is different domains. One is SH3 domain. So this acts as a negative regulator of the catalytic site. SH2, which is rigidly bind to SH3. And then there is something called as the kinase domain, which is an SH1 domain. It has 2 lobes. One is N lobe and one is C lobe. So N lobe has a phosphate binding site for ATP and C lobe has an activation loop. So it is in this cleft where ATP binds and causes phosphorylation of tyrosine residue. So initially in the quiescent stage, this loop is inwards. This activation loop is inwards. But when it is in on state, this is flipped outwards, and then specific ATP binding site substrate can cause phosphorylation of this tyrosine residue and cause subsequent proliferation of cancer cells. So this is the switch. This is what we call the switch. So here This is in quiescent or off stage, and this is in on stage. This is switch. There is something called as clamp. So this clamp is because of close approximation of N lobe to C lobe, and this is because of the rigid juxtaposition of SH3 with SH2 domains. So it causes limited breathing between the N lobe and C lobe, so that ATP binding site is closed. And then there is something called as a latch. So this is when the distal end lobe moiety latches onto the SH2 domain. So when there is BCR-ABL1 protein or fusion formed, it causes disruption of all the three switch clamp latch mechanisms, causing proliferation of cancer cells in the on stage. So what imatinib does is it binds to this cleft or groove, and then it inhibits the proliferation of cancer cells by inhibiting the phosphorylation of tyrosine residue. And if there is T315I mutation, then it will cause steric inhibition of imatinib binding site. So these are various methodologies which can be used to detect kinase domain mutations. So the common ones are NGS and Sanger sequencing. So shown are the sensitivities, advantages and disadvantages. So initially Sanger sequencing was preferred because it had 15 to 25% reasonable sensitivity, but NGS was expensive. It had limited data and it had very less availability. But now it is not the case. So next generation sequencing is highly sensitive. It detects till 3% or 1% in many cases. It also helps us to distinguish between compound and polyclonal mutations. So when it is available and standardized, NGS should be preferred. So this is the figure showing polyclonal mutations. Here, the two different type of mutations are there, but they are in different alleles. And this is the same allele. So these are called compound mutations. Both the mutations are present on the same read. So there are many publications now which clearly show that next generation sequencing is a lot better technique than Sanger sequencing because it can detect at very low sensitivities. So this paper highlights the importance of NGS over Sanger. So it shows that it proves that it can reveal emerging resistant mutations about 2 to 11 months earlier than conventional sequencing. So this graph shows the same. So on x-axis, what we can see is the number of months after starting imatinib, and on y-axis, you can see different patients. So here, yellow blocks indicate that mutation is undetectable by both Sanger as well as by NGS. The green ones indicate that mutation is not detectable by Sanger, but it is detectable by next generation sequencing. And the red blocks indicate that it's detectable by both the techniques. So as you can see, the second patient, in the third month, it could be detected by NGS, but not by Sanger sequencing. So it could detect this mutation 2 months earlier than Sanger sequencing. This is another publication which had 3 findings. So this study showed that in about half of the patients, TKI resistant mutations that trigger relapse, they were already present at low level at the type of therapy switch. So if NGS would have been done instead of Sanger, these mutations would have been picked up. Second finding was a very interesting finding that none of the low level dasatinib or nilotinib resistant mutations at switchover failed to expand whenever the patient received second generation TKI to whom they were insensitive, meaning thereby that if there is a low level mutation and if it is not appropriately dealt with, it will definitely expand. And this is the third finding, is that in patients who did not experience subsequent relapse, no low level mutation was identified which was resistant to second generation TKI that each patient actually received. So taking all of these into consideration, the European Leukemia Network 2020 recommendations state that BCR-ABL1 mutations can be detected with sensitivities of about 20% by Sanger sequencing and of about 3% by next generation sequencing. And the greater sensitivity of NGS enables early detection of clinically relevant BCR-ABL1 resistant mutations. And the most important point is that NGS is recommended technology to detect BCR-ABL1 resistance mutations in patients not responding adequately to TKIs. So let us see a last case. This came to us about 2 months back. So this was 33 years male on imatinib. So we could detect very low variant allele frequency mutations, which were significant. So this is F359V. So we can give dasatinib to this patient, and But this is again another mutation that we found in the same patient. It was T315I. So if we would have not done NGS and we would have done Sanger, we would have missed both of these mutations because these are very low variant allele frequency, less than 20%, we would have missed it. So we can offer ponatinib if available, or we can take the patient for transplant. So in short, I just want to tell that EDTA samples are need to be given for any molecular diagnosis in cases of CML. So usually one EDTA sample would suffice, but it is better to send two because sometimes counts will be low and it would be insufficient sample. It needs to be stored properly. It has to be stored under cool conditions, and we should always try for a very quick transport. And this is the test requisition form that you need to fill up to get a good and accurate diagnosis. So if you find all these things together, you can get accurate diagnosis. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta, for the insightful talk. I would like to request all the participants, if you have any questions, to kindly ask in the chat box. Also, the questions, if unanswered, then Dr. Mehta would, individually address them later after the session. So kindly ask your questions in the chat box.
So I think we do not have any questions. So if you have any questions, you can always mail me at arpan.mehta@superatechlabs.com, and we would close this session. Thank you so much.
So we
Sir,
have a questions. We have one
yes,
question.
there's, I think, one question in the
Yes,
chat box.
yes. So Anjali Shah is asking that is it possible to get the BCR-ABL1 quantities too high after 3 months of imatinib treatment? Yes, so it is possible in occasional patients. You will find that BCR-ABL1 level is more than what we expect. So in these cases, we have to do imatinib resistance mutation analysis because it will fit into warning or failure. So this is my ID. Yes. Yes, so I don't think there are any further questions.
Doctor, we have one more question in the chat box.
Okay.
That is, let us know the type of mutation not normally detected by RT-PCR, E14, and what else?
Yes, so let us know the type of mutations not normally detected by RT-PCR, E14, and what else. Yes, so when you are doing real-time PCR, we might miss the mutations. If we are doing reverse transcription PCR, we need to know what lab is doing what. So we do a multiplex-based BCR-ABL1 qualitative analysis, what I showed you on GEL. So it will pick up all the types of BCR-ABL1 transcripts. So if you order a BCR-ABL1 qualitative detection, we would be able to detect all the type of transcripts unless it is a very rare case.
We have one more question, doctor. Any pre-analytical measures?
Yes. Dr. Akash Shah is asking whether there are any pre-analytical measures to be taken care of. So yes, this is a very important question. Why? Because usually we find that patient samples are being sent from far away places and they reach us by around 2 to 3 days. By this time, the sample is not in a good shape if it is not stored properly. So if in case of transport samples, we would find that ABL1 copies will decrease. So the sensitivity of our assay will be compromised. So it is important that the sample is sent before 48 hours and it is stored under cool climate conditions.
There's one more question, sir. Can we perform quantitative detection with SYBR green?
Yes. So there can be different methodologies for detection, but cyber green is not the right way of detection. Is atypical CML same as cryptic CML? Yes, so this is a very important question. Atypical CML is defined as in 2017, if you see, then it is atypical CML BCR-ABL1 negative. So if BCR-ABL is negative, then atypical CML can happen. But cryptic CML is still chronic myeloid leukemia. It is not atypical CML. Cryptic CML, when we call, is when karyotype becomes as normal. So that karyotype is not able to detect is a very small thing there. If karyotype is not able to detect that mutation, then or the translocation, then we call as cryptic. And this we are able to detect by using FISH or by molecular technique, that is by BCR-ABL1 qualitative analysis. So in this case, we will call it as chronic myeloid leukemia BCR-ABL1 positive, even if it is cryptic, and we will not call it as atypical chronic myeloid leukemia BCR-ABL1 negative.
Any other questions, participants? There's one more question, sir. Is gene therapy for treatment would be preferred?
Yes. So in chronic myeloid leukemia, the ELN2 2020 does not document gene therapy. It may come in future, but as of now, it is not the right way of treating it. You can take the last type of patients, that is they go in blast phase. You can give appropriate TKI to that patient if it is sensitive, or else take the patient for transplant. There is no other way.
Thank you,
Hello,
sir.
Dr. Arpan. Hello, Dr. Arpan. Dr. Divyesh here.
Hi, tell me.
Yeah, actually, I had one patient. Clinically, he was a classic CML.
Okay.
And actually, I had started that patient on hydroxyurea initially, and I had sent only quantitative BCR-ABL because the patient was from a far village. He was very poor. He was not able to arrange finances for qualitative as well as quantitative BCR-ABL. So I had ordered only quantitative BCR-ABL. And that quantitative BCR-ABL actually came very low. It was almost only 0.5%.
Okay.
But the patient was not affordable to do qualitative BCR-ABL. So I was not able to detect whether it was a P210 or P190 like that. But he was classic CML clinically. So I started him on TKI. And the patient responded well. Since last 3 months now, the patient is in complete remission. Now the counts from 4 lakh has come down to normal 5,000-6,000. Even platelet count is normal. Spleen has regressed. So what can be the possibilities in such case?
Yes. So yes. So this is a very good case. Basically, one needs to know when quantitative PCR was ordered, which type of transcripts were detected by that quantitative PCR, because it is not necessary that only P210 quantitative PCRs are there. There are few labs which are also doing P190 PCR. So I presume that the lab is doing P210 type of quantitative PCR. So in this case, the lab has reported a value of 0.5%. So in this case, the possibilities include that there is one more transcript which is present, and it is known in CML that there can be alternate splicing. So in alternate splicing, I have seen personally many cases in which you will find a rare transcript, like suppose a patient would have E14A3 type of transcript, and by the process of alternate splicing, there will be very low levels of E14A2 or E13A2 type of transcripts. So when you are doing RQ-PCR, real-time quantitative PCR of P210, it will only detect E14A2 transcript, which would have been present at a very low level, like in this patient, but it would have missed a very high level of a rare transcript which was not detected. So that is one strong possibility, seeing that clinically this was the case. Second possibility is that the lab might not have a good assay and it is reporting without clinical history, in which case there can be a background contamination which might lead to 0.5% level of BCR-ABL1. In this case, the patient might have some very rare transcript like ETV6-ABL1, like I just showed you a case in which the true transcript is ETV6-ABL1 and rare transcript, which is actually a background contamination. So it is actually BCR-ABL1 negative, but it is reported as positive. So these are the two possibilities that I presume.
Thank you, Dr. Arpan.
There's another question. Is there any association between polycomb gene and BCR-ABL quantity?
No, not as of I know.
What is the reason behind myeloid leukemia, CML or AML? And is it highly curable?
What is the reason behind myeloid leukemia? So acute myeloid leukemia and chronic myeloid leukemia are two different disorders. CML is basically a hematopoietic stem cell disorder, while AML is basically an oligoclonal disease that results, if you see the pathogenesis of AML, it results from stepwise different mutations. And the reason can be multifactorial. It is most often idiopathic. It can be linked to radiation and stuff, but there is no short etiology that has been documented. There are few cases in which radiation exposure has happened. There are some cases of therapy related AML in which there is a different disorder altogether, like a multiple myeloma, and you give treatment, and because of that there is therapy reduced acute myeloid leukemia that is happening. But there are different reasons, but there is no specific reason that you can attribute to CML or AML. So CML, anyone getting the disorder, and is it highly curable? Yes. So CML is now known in ELN 2020 recommendations even state that just like a normal individual CML patient can live his life. So apart from if the patient is compliant for his medication and if the patient receives the right medication, then usually a patient can live a normal life just like a non-CML patient. But in AML, it is not the case. It is found to have very low cure rate. It can be about 60% of cases might face remission, and they might as well relapse later on as well. So AML is not a good disease. Any relation between BCR-ABL1 quantity and mutations? Well, there is no relation between BCR-ABL1 quantity and mutations, but yes, it is found that in cases which present with accelerator phase or blast phase, it is usually found to have less frequently kinase domain mutations, but cases which come with chronic phase and then they are resistant to therapies and then they develop into accelerator or blast phase, they will find more often kinase domain mutations as compared to patients with chronic phase.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta. We still have a few minutes left. If anybody wants to ask some questions, please, you can type it in the chat box, or else we can head towards the end of the session. So I think all the questions were answered. Thank you, Dr. Mehta, for your time. And thank you all the participants for attending the session. Yeah, so can we end it, Krishna?